Now, what did we talk about? So the conversation that we had, how long have you been in Australia? This was usually the way that the conversation started. Can you tell me about your settlement experience? So all open-ended questions to get people to talk about their stories. And in particular, this one important question for me, your experiences as a Muslim in Australia. Now keep in mind that some of the participants were actually born in Australia and others were actually born in Australia to Muslim parents. Others actually, we have two of them who had converted to Islam whilst here in Australia. Raising children in Australia, what are some of the challenges? That I've got it in bold because this question were the ones that generated the more passionate discussions. Raising children, sorry, what are some of the challenges? Where do your ideas of values on parenting come from? What are the challenges for you as an individual, family, or a couple? And what are the views on the social settlement services available? And what do you think would have helped? This is like the wish list, you know. If you had a magic wand, what would you like? And it again, I won't have time to go into details about the questions there. If you want to read about it, have a look at my thesis when it's published. It's a bit of marketing here. Right, so emerging themes. This is because I did already the preliminary analysis of all the interviews. Education, children's education, as I mentioned briefly before. For some parents, children that came to school, they prefer, Muslim parents prefer for children to go into Muslim to Islamic colleges or something like that. But listen, given as you see the numbers of population increase, a few parents actually decide to send their children to Catholic schools or private schools. No problem with that. And certainly what they did, because they felt that those schools provided the moral and the values that they felt that children should be raised with. So, and certainly when they came home from school and whenever they had attended like religious classes, they would clarify things. Like, who's this Jesus? Who was this thing about Christmas? We'll talk about that. No worries. So parents used and clarified things when children came home. Issue of socialization of their children, family relationships, parenting issues, parenting challenges, community relationships, religious practice, social and settlement services. Again, in terms of religious practice, some interesting things that came up is, for instance, that a number of the families I've interviewed many of the children that attended Catholic schools or private schools, public schools even, they made sure that when the children were home that they had a room set up in the house where they taught them about Islam, about the Quran, taught them Arabic. So make sure that the children knew about the religion and religious practice. Moving right along, parenting. This is a quote from one of the participants, and I felt it illustrated really what, in an interesting way. So, when you come into a new country, to Western society, you cannot expect to be able to avoid it. So it's like you go in the pool, you expect to get wet. And then he talks about, certainly there's some things we can compromise. So this is the quotes, the main findings. Now, this is, I've just been recently working through and writing on my final write-up about this. And this was something, at least for many parents, not just Muslim parents, but for many parents, the issue of social media is a huge one. Interestingly enough, as you're probably aware, and this was actually created in Indonesia, Salam World, Salam World was launched in February this year, and it's the Muslim version of Facebook. What has happened there is that this Muslim world trying to bring social media that young people and everybody can use, but that in a sense trying to fill the gap and give another option for people from Muslims to be able to also socialize on the web in an environment that's acceptable. Mobile phones and use of mobile phones, social and gender relationships, as you can imagine with children out there, you know, the pressure is on, peer group pressure, and alcohol. Yes? Oh, quickly. Again, parenting styles learned from experiences from family of origin, so they are always framed by religious and spiritual beliefs. This issue of child discipline did not come up at interviews, but certainly was just under the surface, but has only been raised in 5 of the 24 interviews. And same thing happened in relation to views on parents' rights versus children's rights. And as I said, you know, from my experience, these issues will be just under the surface. This is one of the participants, quote from one of them. If you're born here and if you understand social norms and what's okay, what's not, it's even for people who are new arrivals who have to start from a very different place. So certainly these parents who were raised in Australia or came from countries, and I'm talking where most are Muslim countries, or Muslim countries as significant, like in Singapore was one of the cases. They need to have a more relaxed but still certain parenting style and approach their children's socialization. Some strategies they used, they were selective in relation to the circle of friends their children had, controlling things, no sleepovers at all, unless children wanted to come over to their place, it was fine. Religious principles and guidance, so that's reiterated all the time about good in bed, I better get rid of that, if I can. Reinforce the importance of doing the right thing. Being flexible, sometimes there's got to be a compromise. And staying in touch with young culture, which sometimes the same social media that is a bit of a challenge can also facilitate people nowadays with Foxtel and other things like that, being in touch with programs that are from their country of origin. It's a very long quote. I think I'll skip this one. When things go wrong, as they do sometimes, because of settling in a new country, this one, it's about getting help, and we'll lead into the next one. This participant said, it's funny what he says, he or she says there, because basically, I mean, from what I know, and my government organizations are really run by average public servants, and I thought as though there's set rules and regulations in place, which is not true. Don't know about the average public servants. Those rules set rules and regulations that offer towards my problem that I have, whatever the problem might be. So preferences, certainly from all participants. First part of call, family. That's certainly the first people we go to. Sometimes it doesn't work that well. I had one of the participants say, well, I was having a problem with my husband, things were not going well. I went to my mum and said, Mum, what should I do? And she said, well, you know, you should go back to your husband and sort it out. Oh well, not the best option, but anyway. Seeking religious advice and guidance from imams, from the local mosque. Non-government Muslim specific services, and certainly there's, for instance, here in Mirbuka, we have a few services that provide that, and government-owned and government service. Some people I spoke with, they said, well, listen, sometimes I personally prefer not to go to a Muslim specific service. I'd rather go to actually just a generic service out there, because I feel that the information I share is going to be contained, so it's not going to go anywhere. Sorry, it's a bit quick, but it's me. Any questions, please?
When's your thesis going to be published?
Submitted by the end of July, and hopefully will be approved sometime end of next year, maybe. I'll keep you posted. Yes.
Did you look at the generational gap in any society? There's generational gap when you do research between the young
and your exact. Now that certainly came up as well. It is mainly, although the parents I spoke with, they seem to have things pretty much under control. But there was actually a couple of them where it mainly happened when the parents do not adjust this as promptly. I'm looking actually into, in the context of our analysis, into acculturation, or so parents adjust to the new social context, social environment, and now that may impact on their parenting as well. Yeah.
We might skip the rest of the questions till the end.
Thank you.
We're certainly having a lot of families experiencing parenting issues and not being feeling supported as parents in the new culture at our centre. So that's why I'm very interested through your paper and what recommendations you might make. And our next speaker, which probably follows on quite well, is Carolyn Spears from the Department of Child Protection and Family Support. And Carolyn will be speaking about, is there really a government department in Australia who steals children? Is there?
Well, that would grab your attention.
Yeah, sure do.
My name's Caroline Spears. I work at the Department for Child Protection in the offices in Mirrabooka, across the road. I've been there for 7-8 years now. And my role is really about bridging the gap between some of the new and emerging communities and the department. So when I first started, my boss then had said, look, we've got some interactions coming through from some of the new and emerging communities. The three major themes are around domestic violence, excessive discipline of children, and teen-parent conflict. And we're really only coming into the department when they're in crisis. So I was given the task of going out to see what I could work out that maybe the department could respond and try and look at some more preventative work. So these are some of the comments that we get on an ongoing basis. The main one is about hearing about not hitting children. I think that message is out very clearly, but a lot of parents are actually starting to feel quite disempowered, and they say, yeah, you say don't hit children, but you don't actually give us any tools of how we should work and discipline our children, and that's why we try and partner with various NGOs around that. The top one, that was a Burundi father, and he was just pointing out that sometimes as young people and children settle quicker than the parents, that they sometimes then use that against the parents, and parents feel quite disempowered and they're really quite fearful of the department. And this one was an interesting one. This was, I was looking over at Christy, this was the Twas. The first time I ever met the Twas, I went down to Assets, I was chatting away, hi, I'm Caroline and I'm here and I'm going to chat to you. And they actually all turned their back and someone, I think, spat. And it was all being translated and I'm smiling and waiting to hear what was being said and like, who is this woman coming in to dare tell us how to raise children? So yeah, now we've got a really good relationship and we chat about parenting, so it's really nice. But it just, I suppose it occurred to me because when I first started, I had come straight from Glasgow, landed in DCP, and I went out and I came back to the boss and I said, I kind of get the feeling people don't really like this department. I'm thinking about it. So I was a bit naive myself. So this is I do a lot of outreach and try and talk to new communities as they come in, just to try and explain what DCP is before all the bad stuff, you know, starts, or they hear too many rumours. Because it's quite a complex idea, I think, for a government department to be interfering with child protection. So it takes a bit of time and energy to do that. So, and the questions, I always get the same questions. The first one is about hitting children, always the first question that comes up. And again, it's, well, can I hit my children? What is that all about? And I mean, we try and say we don't condone it. Obviously, it's not in the legislation at the moment, but it's really just about giving the parents as much information as we can. And this one was quite interesting because it changed policy internally. So we had a lot of young children being left home, and of course the social workers would go out and say, you know, you can't leave your children at home alone, what's that all about? But then the more families that were in this situation, they realised that they'd often come from a refugee camp, they had come from extended family, so there was always people around, so leaving your children was never a big deal. And it was only coming into you know, a house in Balga and suddenly being on your own and realising that that was a problem. So that was more about education. And then we've got all our lovely people like Gabby over there. So I always say, we kind of do a good cop, bad cop. So I go in as the bad guy and say, you know, don't do this, and then say, but there's all these amazing people who can help and give you tools and strategies. So it's really important, I think, for us as a department to have these really strong partnerships where we can. And alongside that, we try and do as much as we can with some of our, you know, community. There's just a couple, you know, you can see Rufus in there. Claire Fass, he's an interesting character for those of you who know Claire Fass, because when I first met him, again, he was going, oh, you know, department, and really giving us a hard time, and he's now come to work for us. He's a family resource employee, and he's in and out of the office all the time, and yeah, I said, can I take your photo and talk about you? He said, yeah. So he's a good news story. And this one, most of you have been at that domestic violence forum out at the Herb Graham, and that day I talked the boss into coming with me, and he gets swamped by people saying, you know, this is what we think things should be. So it's good to see internally as well as externally. This is the camp with Chris and Joe that we had last Saturday, and again, just picking up on our main themes, this is about the teen conflict. So partnering with the Edward Rice, and I think we had 55 in total, parents and teens, and it wasn't really about giving answers or saying this is the right way, but it was just about listening to the parents and having them been heard, listening to the young people, and then just trying to see what commonalities we were instead of looking at all the problems. So that was really good. I think we're going to try and run that every quarter now. And again, how important it is to have all our partner agencies. There's Celestine got dogged into helping us with some research, we've got Gabby and Hannah, try and get involved in the Harmony events and all the different activities to keep working in the area. This was our minister came out with wanting to meet some community people there, and this is just some of the workshops to try and talk to the women about the role of the department. And then we have, a bit like Cleophas, this is Materno. I think most of you know Materno, who he came from Sudan a few years ago, and he lost his son really tragically up at Mandani a few months ago. But again, through the Strengthening Our Communities project, we've been working with Materno, and he's now my key speaker when I go and talk to the department. He comes out and he talks about his experience, and he's part of our training now. So again, it's just trying to bring people in where we can. Foster care, that whole idea of foster care, that Western way of caring for children, what's that all about? And again, just trying to say that if we did have the situation of having, say, an African child coming into care, we actually didn't have any African carers, and now we have Trinity, who is our first Burundi refugee foster carer who's come through and has become a general carer. So it's just caring for a white baby at the moment because we don't have any carers. So yeah, we've got the foster care recruitment that goes on as well. And I think that the change that I see in my 7 years is, you know, we have Abdul from Somalia, he's a social worker who's come through, Gadisa from Eritrea. So we've got a real change, I think, in the dynamics. So it's not, you know, Caroline talking about cold stuff. We've really got a change in how we're working. And I just put those stats up because I think there was a lot of bad press there for a while about the number of African kids coming into care and the department really, you know, picking on the African communities. And it is less than 1% out of the 3,792. So although there might be things happening at front end, what we call it front end, the interaction side, it's not actually bad enough for the department to be removing children. So we always think that that's down to all this work that happens out in the communities, the relationships, the elders, the NGOs, that really families are staying together. So it's quite a good news story, I think. I think that's me. Time for questions.
I'm really impressed with the partnership work that obviously the department's doing in this region and strengthening families. We're having a lot of trouble south of the river with a lot of these parenting issues, and some children, that families that we're working with have been in care for many years, and children are losing their cultural identity, which is always a concern. And I'm just wondering, from the DCP level, are these learnings and this work that you're doing in the northern suburbs being shared with DCP in the southern suburbs, or is it just very regional? I mean, is it an approach that is going to be spread?
I'd say it's quite regional, but I'm just going to dog with Bardo. Where is he? He's our principal cold planning guy. South of the river, I know I've just covered in Mirabuka, but for some of the initiatives, and what district is it?
Well, it's Fremantle, Rockingham. I mean, some of the problems we've been having with Rockingham, we have been meeting with DCP, they're very willing to work with us. But there's a real issue about, well, the client who's the parent is your client and the children are our clients. There's not much family stuff, integration stuff going on. So it sounds like that this area is a lot further along, and being one department, I would hope that some of that good work is being...
Yeah, we did certainly try to do central, but maybe I could get your number later. We could talk.
We're planning to clone Caroline and get into Fremantle.
That's the short answer. I have a question. You mentioned about the services you provide to communities and education among them, and you have quite a diverse team. I was just wondering, where do you get training about those cultures that you know? Do you get any form of training? How long does it last? Who provides that?
It's all a bit sporadic, really. I think I probably look at the same training calendars as everyone here and go through assets or just whatever's out there. I mean, I know we've been involved in that City of Stirling workshop to say that there is a need for a training that's a bit more than what's already in offer. But yeah, it's all a bit sporadic, really.
I think the important thing is like having the interest and asking the questions. Because like in our centre we see about 60 different countries of origin amongst our client group, and we were saying to service providers, we can't possibly know the intricacies of all the cultures. But thinking of families, asking them how they do it and how they can marry their experience with what's expected in this new culture is probably the best training that we can have, learning from the clients. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you, Caroline. And our next speaker, is Farida Foster, University of Western Australia. I'm not going to give you all for a long time. And Farida will be speaking about civic and ethno-belonging among recent refugees to Australia. You have 10 minutes.
Yes. I'm going to start off with a sob story. This is a 20-minute presentation, but we had so many interesting offers of presentations that I sacrificed my 20 minutes for 10 minutes. So I'm going to try to whiz through it quite quickly. Basically, I'm involved in a lot of research projects that often partner with some of the settlement agencies, so I know a lot of the people here. And what I'm going to talk about today is a kind of a slightly academic version of one very small section of the findings of a project that I did in partnership with Michael's organisation here. But I also wanted to mention that I brought along some copies of the executive summary of a report we did last year for the Department of Training and Workforce Development that was more broadly on settlement issues for migrants more broadly. This particular project is looking at settlement issues for people from humanitarian backgrounds, but there is an executive summary of that larger report, and I can send a copy of that from the other project. So that's just a plug for that other project. And this project was conducted with the assistance of the research officer Lisa Hartley, who will be speaking on another project after my presentation. So basically, in summary, the argument that I want to present today is that refugees living in Western Australia orient to their sense of belonging in the nation in terms of what has been called in the literature a civic nationalism, a sense of civic belonging. There is another form of nationalism called ethno-nationalism or ethno-belonging. And the people that we spoke to as part of this project, when we asked them about this sense of belonging, they recognised this as a sense of belonging, but it wasn't something that they themselves strongly felt, but it was something they aspired to, that at some point in the future they hoped they also would belong in kind of ethnic terms, and I'll give the definitions of these shortly. So that was an aspirational form of belonging for them. Okay, so what do we mean by ethno-belonging? Basically, ethno-belonging sees the nation state as something that is a collective of people who belong together based on their similarity. What is this similarity? Well, because they have a shared sort of history, they have a shared language, they may have a shared religion, they have a shared culture, a shared ancestry even, and so on. That's kind of a traditional version of belonging in a nation state. More recently, theorists have argued that we are moving towards a sense of civic belonging in the nation state. And this is a sense of that we all belong together, not necessarily because of our similarities, but because we share a set of values that are associated with the state. So we orient ourselves to the political structure, which is the nation state. And we see ourselves as belonging together because of that connection to the state. And there's a quote from one of the theorists who has made this argument that commitment to a single political culture and procedures for the legitimate enactment of laws and exercise of power should be the form of the basis of national identity. Now, theorists have argued that this is what we're moving towards, and some of the evidence from research projects more broadly have said this is what we're moving towards. But we also have theorists who say that we're actually now moving beyond that stage towards a post-nationalism, a situation where people now have connections to so many other countries or see themselves more in terms of global citizenship that you don't even need a sense of national belonging. So I was interested in this project to explore the extent to which refugees actually might have that sense of identity, because some theorists have suggested that in fact refugees, because they've been uprooted from their countries of origin, because they don't have necessarily a strong connection to the nation to which they've been brought, they may have a sense of post-national identity. They feel as though they belong more to the globe, to a world community than to a national one. We used Ager and Strang's, some of you will be familiar with this model of settlement. Ager and Strang argued that refugees have a number of domains in which their settlement can be characterised. And these domains are both measures of successful settlement and indicators of successful settlement. It's based on a foundation of rights and citizenship. The facilitators of that sense of belonging include language and cultural knowledge, safety and stability. The social connections with people are really important at that next level, and the ways in which we can see successful settlement is through integration in terms of employment, housing, education and health. And these were some of the areas that we looked at as part of this project, but what I'm reporting today is specifically the sense of belonging. You all know the figures. I have to change this PowerPoint. We no longer are laying in 20,000, we've gone back down to 13,750. Australia ranks as third in the world in terms of the numbers of refugees that it brings through the UNHCR program, and first in terms of per capita intake. It offers some of the best settlement services in the world. This has been recognised by a number of sources. Okay, so the project It was Lottery West funded, done in partnership with the Metropolitan Migrant Resource Centre. The broader study looked at a range of different settlement areas, which I won't go into now. It included interviews with a number of people of refugee backgrounds, focus groups with service providers, and a photo voice exercise. And if I have time at the end, I'll show you a few of those. This is a kind of a summary of the project, and I have some copies of that, which I didn't bring today, but if you'd like.
We have some.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We have some in the other
Michael
place
has
if you want
some.
to.
Okay, so 77 humanitarian entrants who have been in Australia for 1 to 2 years versus 2 to 4 years. Range of different source countries you can see there, from African backgrounds, Middle Eastern backgrounds, and some from Asia. We had a range of ages, almost equal numbers of men and women, and people were interviewed by